So I just tried to start speaking. I was told to wait 30 seconds, which have passed like 5 seconds ago. I hope that everyone is hearing me. I can't see how many people are actually dialed in or can see or hear me. Anyways, we just get started, and if there should be some technical problems, please drop us a note on either the GoToWebinar meeting or the on-air app. I'd first like to start by mentioning that there was some confusion about the language of this workshop. The professor who quickly introduced us said that this workshop would be in English. We can do it in English. However, initially we were told to do it in German because there are not so many international participants. So someone can hear and see us fine. Great, that's reassuring. Thank you, Mrs. Naumann. We will switch into German now. If there are any international participants who don't speak or understand German, please drop us a note and we'll switch back to English in any minute. Genau, dann starten wir. Vielen Dank, dass Sie sich für unseren Workshop entschieden haben. Wir sehen mittlerweile 17 Teilnehmerinnen und Teilnehmer. Schön, ganz kuschelige Atmosphäre hier. Unser Thema ist the Startup and Corporate Collaborations to Drive Responsible Leadership. Wir hatten uns gefragt, als die Veranstalter uns fragten, zu welchem Thema wir im Themenbereich Responsible Leadership einen Workshop machen können, mit welchem Thema wir starten. Wir dachten, eigentlich ist es doch gut, über die Zusammenarbeit von Corporates und Startups zu sprechen, weil wir glauben, dass die ein ganz entscheidender Hebel sein können für das, was wir unter Responsible Leadership verstehen. Und da fängt die Problematik schon mal an, denn offenkundig gibt es sehr verschiedene Interpretationen dazu, was Responsible Leadership ist. Bevor wir darauf eingehen, hätte ich fast vergessen, uns vorzustellen. Mein Name ist Melde, ich sage gleich noch ein bisschen was zu mir, weil viel prominenter und viel mehr zu sagen hat die Miki Yokoyama.
Ja, hallo und herzlich willkommen zu dieser Session. Mein Name ist Miki Yokoyama und ich bin Managing Partner beim Startup Accelerator TechFounders. Und TechFounders bringt etablierte Unternehmen und Startups zusammen, um gemeinsam Pilotprojekte aufzusetzen. Das kann zum Thema Sustainability sein, kann auch zu ganz anderen Innovationsthemen sein. Versuchen wir, diesen zwei Parteien zu helfen, zusammenzukommen und neue Themen zu treiben. Und TechFounders ist Teil der Unternehmertum. Das ist eines der größten Gründer- und Innovationszentren in Europa, hier in München. Genau.
Cool. I just received a message from one participant who asked us to present in English, which we will obviously do. Sorry for the confusion, was some miscommunication between the organizer and us. We continue in English. Miki just said that she's representing TechFounders, which is a startup accelerator program, as you can see on the slide, based here in Munich. And I've been knowing Miki for several years now. We met at BMW, where we both worked for the sustainability department, and then went different ways. I started to work for Akzente, which is a sustainability consultancy, also based in Munich and in Berlin, and we found each other again like 1 or 2 years ago with the idea to basically bring together startups and corporations because we think that there's a huge lever for sustainable development in this sort of cooperation, especially for responsible leadership. And I initially started to say that there's some confusion, obviously, about what responsible leadership can mean. We've heard this morning in different sessions different aspects, different definitions, understandings of what responsible leadership can or must be. What I found quite convincing as a definition was a publication presented on the World Economic Forum of last year, or this year basically, I think, and it was developed together with Accenture, where those associations interviewed, I think, 700 young global leaders who were asked what features of leadership is needed from their perspective in order to tackle the great challenges of the 2020s, be it climate change, the climate crisis, overburdening the planetary boundaries, and so on. And what that sort of survey found was that there are basically 5 features of responsible leadership in an era which requires bold action in terms of sustainability. And many of them are not so surprising. Firstly, stakeholder inclusion, to focus on trust, be accountable, managed with an orientation towards impact. Also, emotion and intuition, speaking about humility, creativity, a gentle way of dealing with people. Mission and purpose, very obvious, very much, very frequently talked about these days, to have a purpose as a corporation. And also technology and innovation and intellect and insight. And then what Accenture did was looking into the most successful companies globally in terms of both sustainability and profitability, and look which of those features are outstanding in those companies who are extremely successful. And what was impressive to me was that not mission and purpose or stakeholder inclusion are those features that make those sustainable and profitable companies outstanding, but basically technology and innovation. And this was striking us, both Miki and me, and then me was striking because I'm working with many corporations on sustainability issues, and what I find there is that still the main drivers for managing sustainability in companies continue to be reputational aspects, customer consumer demands where they already exist, increasingly investor interest, as we've heard also in a couple of sessions today and yesterday evening. But what continues to be a driver that tends to be ignored in terms of benefits that sustainability can bring to companies is product and process innovation. The graph that you're seeing here is representing 125 BSR member companies, so basically big blue chip US companies who were interviewed in 2019 by BSR, what the main drivers for sustainability is for them. So that's quite striking that the most successful companies in terms of sustainability and profitability are those who focus on sustainable innovation, but they actually only a small number of companies has an integrated perspective on how to combine innovation, be it in product or process, and sustainability. And what Miki and I also did in the course of this year actually was to research several publications that already existed, and we also ran a survey among, I think, was it 2,000, 1,000 European startups, but mostly technology startups, and we asked them if they care about sustainability at all, and we were very surprised to find that 83% of the startups that are less than 5 years old think that sustainability will become more important for their business model. Most of those 83% even start thinking about integrating sustainability into their business model during the founding phase of their startup. Also striking, at least for Germany, that the 26% of all the companies that have been founded in Germany in the last years are associated to the green economy, green startups, and especially in fields where innovation is very important, like energy production, chemical products, agriculture, mobility. We see that 66% of startups can be classified as green and have a sustainable focus. So if we bring those two perspectives together, corporations basically ignoring the potential of innovation for sustainability, and startups who are keen on innovating for sustainability, becomes quite obvious that there might be a tremendous opportunity for both corporates and for startups to work together in order to drive the sustainability agenda. And how those corporations and collaborations can succeed is something that Miki is going to talk about now in more depth.
Yes, so as Thomas said, we think there's an enormous lever to bring these two parties together, and there are quite a huge variety of different benefits, which we try to summarize in 5 points or 5 aspects, basically. So one is definitely for R&D, that if big companies work together with startups, they get a whole new perspective also on their R&D topics, and also another or cost-efficient, a different way of testing and innovating solutions. So as an R&D department, usually you need to get a lot of budgets or human resources to start a new R&D projects. And if you're not sure about the benefits, it's quite difficult to get these budgets. To test solutions with startups means you need usually a smaller budget and can test a variety of solutions in a fast way without having to actually build up the skills or the knowledge or the experience internally yet before we have some more knowledge about a new field that you're testing out. Then for strategy, we think it helps enormously to work with external parties on innovative topics or innovation topics, mostly because if you have worked for a company for a few years, you see that you might also become blind to few developments that are happening outside, that you're getting used to how processes or how things work at your own company. So working with a fresh mindset gives entirely new perspective and also the possibility to drive entirely new models that people internally haven't thought about. Then third, for business development, that goes actually hand in hand also with strategy or innovation topics and innovating the product portfolio or also looking at new customer or business areas. Then fourth, operations. In many corporations that we help to set up between corporates and startups, process digitalization or also increasing efficiency across the value chain is a big topic. So for example, looking at new HR tools, new finance automation tools for finance processes, or also especially customer service, where a lot of manual work is still being done. And then also across traditional manufacturing supply chains, like production, supply chain, sales processes, there's a lot of potential to also increase efficiencies and often then also to drive sustainability topics, to reduce waste, to reduce water usage and so forth. And then last, the point of human resources, we see that a lot of companies we work with, they're very keen on actually exploring new topics, and that especially the young people are very excited to work with startups on new topics, to discover new mindsets, different ways of working, and also as a possibility to really further develop your skills, to try out something new, and also in many ways it's also a lot of fun. But yeah, okay. I'll come to the but later. A few examples of how corporates actually work with startups. So most commonly we see 4 different types of how you as a corporation can work with a startup. So first of all, the example of how Adidas and Nike work with Dye-Ku. It was a different dyeing process, so chemical-free dyeing process, because you need to use a lot of chemicals to make the different colors for textiles. And they tested out the new process with a startup in a very individual partnership without any program or investment tied to it, but rather to test out the startup as a potential new supplier for their processes. So that's one type. I think it was set up 8 years ago already, so quite long-standing. And the goal of setting up pilot projects is, of course, always to put it into a longer-term partnership. And it worked in this case, but in many cases also you need kind of a mediator or some external neutral party who can help you set up the collaboration. And that's what Aldi North and Aldi South did. So they worked with us to set up their pilot projects and also the collaborations that they aspire with startups. They are part of the TechFounders program, so where different companies join the program to be helped with to find the most promising startups in their innovation or sustainability fields. And Aldi, in this case, is looking for startups that have either new innovative packaging solutions, so to reduce plastic in the packaging, to look at meat alternatives, new, more sustainable food alternatives. Yeah, so a variety, especially for the product portfolio, and helping the startups also to get a foothold into retail and then help them scale, of course, through all the different Aldi markets. AB InBev does this with a different format. So they have launched an own accelerator program. So they're looking for startups to invest in them and to help them with their own program that they set up. And every startup that cooperates with them gets also a pilot project with AB InBev to potentially then become a long-term supplier. And then last, IKEA, for example, does this with an own venture capital investment firm. So they have set aside a certain sum that they want to invest in startups with, to, as they say, lead home furnishing retail into future, and also to make a positive difference to people and planet. So it's very much focused on sustainability investments, but also ultimately to benefit the company. There's no best way or one good way to really start a cooperation with startups. It always depends on the company itself, on how far you are, how much experience you have in working with startups. And mostly, I think when corporates don't have any experience, they try to join an existing program first to learn from the other corporates and also from the experience that the organizing institution basically already has with startups. Then last, why is this helpful to start with an established program? There are a lot of challenges when it comes to startup corporate collaborations. On the left side, you can see from a survey that the Boston Consulting Group conducted that startups and corporates have different reasons why partnerships fail. Mostly it's about just different speed and different expectations. And the reasons for this, you can see on the right side, is that the approach on how startups do business and how corporates do business is very different. So startups, for example, they're very high risk and they have a inherent fail fast mentality, right? So they try to test the product. If it doesn't work, they change. So on the second bullet, you can also see they do very early customer tests. If they discover it doesn't work, then they just pivot and change the business model or change the strategy and everything. A corporate can't do that, right? So most corporates, also due to the growth and the history, they are more risk averse. They have to be more sure that a product really works before they get it to the market. And also it's more difficult to test out new products and business models or directions, as it might cannibalize also your business model. Then third bullet on the top for the startup approach, they often have a milestone-based equity funding. So that basically means that a startup develops a prototype and then an investor says, okay, I'll give you this amount of money to get you to the next stage. If it doesn't work by then, you need to change the product. But I won't give you money for the next 5 years, and then you can just see what to do with it. For corporates, it's different. Often budgets are more allocated on a longer term basis, and you have to have a really good plan how you want to allocate the budget and for which topics. And then in terms of ownerships, of course, yeah, the founder of a startup directly participates in the company's success, while it's very different in a corporate setting. So you're also, that kind of also inherently means you're less risk or more risk averse, let's say, and also have a different style of testing and yeah, going cross limits probably for the company. Yeah, business approach. Startups are highly agile. As I said, they change frequently the direction, while corporates often set their company strategy for 5 or 10 years, and they try to follow the strategy. And the last one I already also touched upon on the legacy topic. Startups don't have anything to lose basically when they try out something new. For corporates, it's a much different story. So as a key takeaway, as Thomas said in the beginning, so corporates overlook sustainability as a key innovation driver. And we see that this is already slowly changing, and more corporates are also trying to bring together the topics of innovation and sustainability, but not that much yet. What we see on the other hand is that sustainability is a huge topic in the entrepreneurship scene, and most startups really think about their role and their possibility to do something good in the market that they're active in or with the product that they've invented. So we see there's a huge potential and also opportunity to bring these two parties together. It's not always easy to set up these collaborations. So what would our starting advice be? Is to really secure top commitment. Actually, probably that's always the advice when starting a new topic or project in a corporate. It's always easier if you have top commitment. Then to know really your clear reasons to collaborate, what you want to get out of it. Is it to innovate the product portfolio? Is it a reputational topic for you? Is it a business? Does it have a clear business rationale that you have to make money with it in the next 12 to 24 months? So that should be clear why you're doing this, because this helps in terms of expectation setting, also how you then approach startups and what the startup can also expect from you. What we would always advise is to get professional external help to get started, to set up the corporation, to avoid common mistakes that are easily avoided when you work with people who have already a little bit more experience in this. Then to identify the right collaboration type for you. So as I said before on the slide with the 4 types, is it a venture capital opportunity? Is it a pilot project collaboration? Is it a more long-term collaboration or different levels basically? So that's something you need to identify. And then it's very important to involve the specialist departments early on to get buy-in from different departments, and not to try to set up this collaboration in isolated fashion with just the strategy division or just the innovation department. And last, working with startups also means you need to be flexible in defining success. Startups fail often, startups are chaotic, they don't follow the processes or are not used to following processes, as it is probably common in corporates. So it needs to have some flexibility in how you set up the corporation, what you define as a success. Maybe also if it doesn't work out, it's also a success because you really found out something new. So that's something that we would advise with when you want to work with startups. And with that, I think we're at the end of our slides. I look forward to your questions if you have any.
The participants actually do have at least one question. We would be very glad if you would just continue sending us any questions that you have. We still have 7 minutes to go in this workshop. We received one question, Miki, which you can probably answer better than me. Do you have any tips on how the corporation or the corporate partner of the corporation side should be organized in order for the corporation to succeed? You already said that obviously the partners need to be involved and the core business needs to be involved. But any further that you can add on this?
Organized, so in terms of organizational structure, I don't think a corporate needs to change anything on that. I think what Thomas already said, yeah, usually it's the innovation or the strategy department who we work together with, but we always tell them you will fail if you do it on your own, because ultimately the goal is to really integrate what the startups do or the pilot projects in the different processes and projects and products. Then it actually is successful, right? If the innovation department tests out something and then it doesn't work out, or it does work out, it will only be successful if then another department takes over and really makes this into a long-term collaboration. So our advice would be to work definitely with a central unit, but this central unit needs to be very needs to involve the different departments that are affected early on, and to also ask them to sort of be a, how do you say, Dienstleister in English, like a service provider for the different units to help them in achieving their targets.
Okay, questions keep on popping up. The next one is if we have any insights on how quickly and to what extent the collaboration influences the corporate's core business.
That depends, I think.
I'd say so too, yeah.
So, yeah, it depends. It's difficult to answer. So, usually what we try to set up is pilot projects of about 5 months. So that's, I think, an appropriate length to really set up or be clear on the different goals, on what you want to achieve during the time, and then for the startup to really have time to integrate the solution or the technology, the software into the process, right, to test that. After these 5 months, then often comes the decision, do we want to work together long term or not? So that takes a little bit more time to really integrate the software, for example, in your HR processes. It also depends on how fast your IT, how willing, for example, your IT department, HR department is to change things. Can be very much, can be faster, can also take a little longer if it's difficult to change things. If it's regarding a product portfolio, same thing. If it's a hardware that needs to be integrated or also software change, can go very fast. It can just take as long as your processes usually take if you implement changes. For Aldi, for example, we put up or we set up pilot projects of about 5 months to test the new products. So that gave Aldi the time to test the requirements with the supplier and logistics and everything, and set up the supply chain to work out the different pricings, and then to really roll it out. I think after 7, 8, 9 months, they roll out the new product. But that's retail, so it's very much different for processes or software topics.
Mm-hmm. Maybe to add on this, particularly with perspective on collaborations between corporations and startups that are focusing on sustainability explicitly, I think one has to be realistic. Those corporations that I've seen have not led to any fast or substantial change in the business model or the core business of those corporations that initiated those corporations, but they very much helped to improve the understanding of the corporation on how to improve on particular sustainability issues, for example, plastics or water or CO2 avoidance or whatsoever. And those necessarily are always very focused corporations that don't have an immediate impact on the entire core business. Time's running out, and we do have another question, probably the last one. Miki, do you see any difference between tech startups and other startups that are not based on innovative tech? Not sure if I understand the question right.
Difference in what way, if you may specify the question? So of course we see differences, because if it's non-tech, it's usually less scalable. If it's like a hardware product, it's a little bit more difficult to scale. In terms of collaborating with companies, it might also take a little bit more time to roll out or to scale, but it always depends on what the product is or what the business model is. Usually we work with more tech-focused companies, or that are tech-based, that have some sort of software or hardware, because I think if you're a purely hardware startup, if it's like a food product or something, they oftentimes want to do distribution very much on their own and tend to collaborate a little bit less. But it very much depends. Sorry that the answer is so often it depends.
Well, as I said, time's running out. No other questions have popped up. You would have another like 60 seconds to drop us a note, but I'm pessimistic if we receive any other messages. Then let us just quickly say thank you very much for dialing into this workshop, to those 17 people who have obviously remained in the workshop. It was fun talking to you through our monitor. Have a good rest of the conference. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for your questions, and we can also put the link to our LinkedIn profiles in the chat, so if you have any further questions, feel free to drop us a line.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.